Well, JC, you've not said that Black Lives Matter yet. You must be a racist. Greetings, I'm JC Pilter, and this is JCPC Apologetics. Well, hello and welcome to another Friday and another video. Today we're going to deal with the current situation. Generally speaking, I don't do a lot of current events videos. You can look back through my, my channel, and you'll see that I've done it on occasion, especially if it's, overtly theological in nature. But as a general rule, that's not something I like to do to deal with current events. But sometimes you have to, just because of the way that the church is fumbling and bumbling at the situation. This whole situation is very interesting, and it kind of shows the providence of God. My bad arguments videos that I post, I record them, or I wrote out the order that I'm going to do these about a while back. It was in January that I came up with the idea, and I basically wrote down every bad argument idea that I've done up to this point down and put them in the order I was going to address them day one. So the irony is that I did the video on the bad argument, the ad hominem argument of that's racist, just not long ago. Calling a person you disagree with on a issue regarding people of different ethnicities, calling them racist. And I posted that, and funny enough, when I posted that video, I said, this is interesting because I've never actually been called racist before, and I found that very much a shock. Within less than a week after I posted that video, I was called racist. Not by somebody who saw the video. There was one guy who said that I was racist in the comment section as a joke, and I appreciate people coming to the comment section to give some humor. We need humor in these days for sure. But somebody actually called me racist who knew nothing of my channel, simply because I said the term racism is an evil term, that it is a term, and we'll get into that in this video. But what I want to kick this thing off with is just by stating the fact that the reason I've been so quiet on this whole George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, I think is the name of the cop, and BLM issue is because I don't like to jump the gun on stuff. One thing I have learned is when you find a controversy, almost immediately everybody jumps in with their opinions. Some people are right, some people are wrong, and most people are a mixture of both. And then facts come out, and it changes the way that you would approach it. And so my inclination is to just be quiet and let the facts come in before I say anything. But I have been quiet for a very long time. Those of you who know me on Facebook know that I have not been quiet. I've let my opinion be known via sharing people who have a more articulate way of putting things than I do. And so basically I've made my presence known there. But for those who do not know me on Facebook and who do not know me personally, who watch this channel, you're probably wondering why I've been so quiet. One, I want the facts to come out. And two, the second reason is the simple fact of the matter is when emotions are high and people just start saying stupid things. And so with situations like this where it is emotionally driven, which 90% of this discussion is, it's better to let things calm down before you address them. I can give you all the facts and statistics and all that good stuff, but emotional people, as a general rule, hate truth. They don't like to be confronted with the fact that they might be having an emotional reaction to the wrong thing and things like that. And so it's better just to be quiet and let the emotion subside a bit before we can address this issue rightfully. So with that said, let me just give my 2 cents on this whole situation. And not so much, I'm probably going to disappoint most everybody just because I think the Christian approach, and this should not be controversial, is to get to the truth. Truth is what matters. And when you realize and have that approach, truth matters, you're going to end up saying things that are unpopular on both sides of the issue. And so what I really want to dive into specifically in this video is the abuse and use of this word racism and the fact that it's not biblical, and the issue of partiality, which is a biblical sin, which is something that we can deal with. So I'm going to dive right in right there. The term racism, which is what I got called racist for the other day because I said that racism is a bad term and we need to stop using it. It's not real. Racism was a term invented by Darwinists, by people who believe in the theory of evolution, by atheists, for the purpose of dividing people, to show their own superiority. An idea, an invention that is created to divide is not something that will ever unite. All the people out there preaching race this, race that, many of them who call themselves Christians, you're never going to unite anybody by preaching something that was designed to divide. And so if there's one thing I would like to see come out of the end of this, is that we need to stop using the world's terms. We need to start talking biblically. We need to start using biblical terminology. And here's what I hate about the term race. Aside from the fact that, historically, again, it was designed for the purpose of dividing people. Before the term race and Darwinism came along, slavery was a normal thing in every culture that has ever existed. They all had slaves. Every ethnic group, every skin color out there has been enslaved, has enslaved, and more often than not, they were enslaved by people who looked just like them. That's the reality. That was normal life. We should praise God that we live in a blessed day where slavery, at least in the Western world, is mostly done away with. There's still a lot of slavery in Saudi Arabia. There's still a lot of slavery in Africa. There's still a lot of slavery in different parts of the world. But the Western world, as a general rule, by the grace of God, has done away with that. And while there have been Christians on both sides of the aisle, the majority of the abolition of slavery has come about by a Christian worldview. We recognize that is a Christian thing. But slavery, again, was normal throughout all of history. But when Darwinism came along with its race perspective, it took slavery from being something that was, just a normal thing that we do to something that was almost ethical. Because now we're no longer just enslaving that guy because, he's our enemy and that's what we do to our enemies. We're now enslaving that guy because he's an inferior race. He can't take care of himself. He needs us superior folks to keep him, keep him up. And, he's less than us anyway. So let him do the horse's work. And, that's that. It gave an actual grounds, a moral, because obviously when you abandon the scripture's morality, you make morality that is anything but. It gave people a moral excuse for slavery. And that is something that we need to realize you can't wash from the word. The word racist is partial in nature. Let's put it that way. And we don't need to endorse that. So here's the real reason why I make such a big difference between race, the term, and partiality. Because aside from one being biblical and one not being biblical, is the fact that one's objective and one's not. All we have to do is read James and we know what partiality is. And I can look at a person treating a person one way and that person another way and be like, you're being impartial. And everybody can look at the Bible and be like, yeah, that's partiality. Not good. But race, it's a malleable thing. You can make race into whatever you want it to be. You can make race into something that only applies to certain people. It's absurd. It's a standard that nobody can nail down. In fact, when I talk to people and they use the term race, because most people use it, it's such a popular word, I have to get people's definition. What do you mean by race? Because No two people agree on what race is. Many people's definition of racism only applies to certain people. Only that group can be racist. Only that group can be racist. These people cannot be racist. But the sin of partiality, I can give you an exact definition. Again, I was called racist because I said racism isn't a thing, even though biblically it's not a thing. And even geneticists have been saying for a long time now, there's no such thing as race. There's just humanity. There's just people. But I'm racist now. Show me. And they can't show where that was a racist statement. They can babble on endlessly about basically their religion that they serve. They can use a lot of terms that have been coined and invented in the last, 100 years or so. But they can't show a objective standard of what racism is and what is wrong. But when I accuse somebody of being partial, I can give you a particular, an exact standard, an objective standard, and everybody can agree, yeah, if that is what partiality is, that guy's being impartial, that guy's being impartial, and it applies to everyone equally. The biblical term that we need to really stop and think about is the word ethnicity. When Jesus gives the Great Commission in Matthew 28, he says, go and make disciples of all nations. And that term is ethnos, I think is the Greek word, which we get ethnic group. That's a more biblical term. Truth is, just because somebody's got the same skin color as you doesn't mean you're part of the same ethnic group. I look at a guy out in, Russia. He's probably very similar color to me. Some people might say we look alike, though I think I look nothing like a Russian. You can look at a Russian and usually know that they are. They're a different ethnic group than me. But this whole race thing would put us under the same race. And so the lines of race is so malleable, so changeable. But with that said, ethnicity is the term that we should use. Ethnic hatred is, as Virgil Walker and Daryl Harrison say, is a better term to use over racism. What I find is a better term in my book is the word partiality. Why? Because the Bible talks about the sin of partiality. God treats us the same regardless of our skin color. God doesn't have a preferred skin color. God does not have a preferred eye color. I don't know why we always make it about skin. Why not make it about eyes, hair, or many other things? But it's always some reason, at least in the Western world today, about skin, for whatever reason. Partiality is showing preferential, or the opposite, treatment to a person based on anything. You can be partial. The example that is given in Scripture, because it's really was the norm throughout history, more so than based on ethnicity, was rich versus poor. People tended in history to show preference to people who are rich, expecting to get in return. There are many reasons why a person might show preference to rich people. Nowadays, it's kind of flipped, and we tend to show more preference to poor people as a general rule, at least in the West. You can show a preferential treatment based on skin color, based on, you can fill in the blank. But we know that that is a sin, and it's called partiality. We don't treat people better or worse because of any of those sort of traits. That is a sin, and it's a better term than racism. And you say, why is that? Because here's the thing. Racism is inobjective. Because it doesn't have a biblical basis, because it's not a biblical idea, people will use that term and attach whatever they want to it. The word racism today, let's be honest, guys, the word racism can only now be applied to white people. That's sin. The term, partiality. The people who are pushing racism, the CT movement, which is critical race movement, critical theory. critical race theory is part of critical theory. If you haven't studied that, I recommend you do, because that will help you to understand a lot of things that's going on today. They will claim that's part of their structure, is that only minorities, or only the group that is in the majority, can be racist. If something is a sin, it is something that can be committed by all people, regardless of their makeup. So if your definition of racism only includes white people, and black people cannot be racist, or Asian people cannot be racist, or fill in the blank cannot be racist, then your definition of racism is a sin. And the vast majority of people out there who talk about racism, they have a sinful view of race. We need to be consistent, impartial, treating people the same regardless of their genetic makeup. So, just as an example, people who peddle race, they talk about things that are not racist and try to make it racist. They talk about what's that thing? They talk about internalized racism. What's internalized racism? It's that you're really racist deep down inside. You may not think you're racist, but guess what? You really are. That's a abstract idea out in ether. They can't actually pinpoint that. You can't point to that and say, no, you're racist because he did this. It's, no, you've never done anything outwardly racist, but you're inwardly racist. You are judging people's hearts and minds. A good word for that would be, it's slander, sin. You're lying about people, again, based on their skin color. They use terms like institutional racism. They can't give you examples of that, or the examples they use have been debunked time and time again, because today we don't have anything that's institutionally racist. If there is, it's schools that discriminate against Asian people all the time. If you were an Asian person with a certain, test score, and a black person with the same test score, 9 out of 10 times, that poor Asian kid is not getting into the school. They're going to give it to the black guy. That's the closest thing we have to institutional racism today. And people will defend that. The people who claim to be about racial equality, they support that. Because what they are standing for is not equality. They're supporting equal outcomes. Their philosophy is fascistic. The idea behind fascism is that everybody, in communism and all that good stuff, is about basically that everybody should be the same. Everybody should have the same things. Everybody should have the same outcome. Everybody should be equal, totally, and completely. But that is an anti-biblical worldview. That is an anti-biblical idea. If you believe that, then you are making God out to be a sinner. And he can't be that. Therefore, you must be. And your worldview must be wrong. God is not about equality. God is not about fairness. God treats us the same, but he does not give us the same. We see, the parable where God in the parable is the farmer, basically, and he goes out and he hires people to work in his field. And then later in the day, he hires another group. And at the end of the day, he hires a group who just works 1 hour. But in the end, he pays them all. And he says, the guys who served the longest said, shouldn't we got paid more? We worked longer than these guys. And he said, hey, it's mine to give what I want. It was a fair wage for you. I'm being really kind to these guys. It's mine to do what I want with. Who are you to judge me, basically, right? But we have people today who hate that sort of mentality that God would give people differently. Yes, the truth is, there are disparities between groups. Now, here's the funny thing about disparities. Nobody denies that they exist. We all know there are disparities. On average, men make more money than women. On average, yes, there are more black people in jail than white. On average, you can fill in the blank. There are many different disparities out there. Now, here's the thing. When we are discussing something, we need to get down to the brass tacks, down to the very foundations of what people are saying. The CT people are saying there are disparities. Disparities are evil. There should be no disparities between people. If you think that, you do not have a Christian worldview. God very plainly says that he gives some differently. He gives some according to their ability. He gave some people 10 talents. He gave some 5. He gave some 1. God is the author of disparities. Now, that does not mean as Christians, we don't jump onto the ditch on both sides of these roads. We don't say all disparity is evil, because that is an evil thing to say. We don't say that all disparity is good, because guess what? There are some disparities. For example, there were some huge disparities back in the slavery days. We all acknowledge slavery was wrong. It was good that we abolished it. Those disparities came about, but it was an objective standard. It's like, why are the black people worse off than the white people in this situation? Well, they're wrong, and they're worse off because they're slaves. They're being enslaved by other people. It's clear. Everybody can see it. The issue was not for those people, did slavery actually exist? The debate was it right or wrong? And clearly we know that it's wrong. It's easier to say that in hindsight. But the debate was never about, was slavery a thing? When you talk about the disparities today, people assume it's wrong that there are disparities, and they can't give you an objective reason, like slavery, as to why it is. The truth is, most of the disparities that we see today are the kinds that just fall under the category of God's providence. God chooses to bless these in particular people just because God chooses to bless those in particular people. Sometimes the disparity is because of sin. If you follow most people who are in just a horrible, situation in life, very often you'd be like, oh, well, your life was miserable because you did this. Your life is miserable because you did this. It's more often than not bad life decisions. Most of the disparities in life come about through life decisions. That's just a simple fact. Make wise choices. Do what is right. It does not guarantee that you will get ahead. We're not prosperity preachers. We don't believe that. But as a general rule, you will do better. Now, here's another thing that's very controversial that I'm going to say, but here's the fact. And I'm going to do a full video on this later at another time. This whole notion of white privilege. God chooses to bless people out of his sovereign will. He does it because he chooses to do so. If white people, I don't believe in white privilege as a thing. I certainly wasn't privileged growing up. I'm much more privileged than my parents were. They both were dirt poor growing up. I am much better off because they followed the word of God, and by the grace of God, he honored that by, giving me a head start that my parents didn't have. So I'm grateful to God for that. I am totally grateful for it. And I don't apologize to my parents because I've had a better upbringing and a better opportunity. In fact, I thank them for it. I am grateful for it. If, for the sake of argument, white privilege was a thing, that white people are better off, they have a better start. And I don't mean like they're better people. I mean that just naturally, because they are white, they have a head start in life. Why should they apologize for that? Why should they check that? It's a blessing from God. You ought to be grateful and praise God that God has blessed this particular group. You always saying, check your privilege. You saying, white privilege is this, white privilege is that. And claiming that it's evil is an attack on God, who distributed to those people the privileges that they have. And it also shows that you have a heart of covetousness, a heart of jealousy, a wicked, lust-filled heart. And you need to repent of that. There is no sin of being privileged. There is no sin of being blessed. There is a sin of envy. There is a sin of covetousness. There is a sin of jealousy. Again, I didn't grow up in a privileged, situation. I am far less privileged than kids who grow up in the, families of athletes and folks, many of which who are darker, have more melanin than me. I'm not jealous of those people. I'm not upset because those people have more than me. Hey, thank God that God has given them what he's given them. They didn't get it through ill means. They got it through work through, a whole lot of other things. But I'm not jealous of that. Great. God's bless them. Praise God. Why is it different when it's a white person who gets ahead? You need to check your heart on these things. And here's another thing that doesn't make any sense about the whole disparities thing. There are more, over 50% of the violent crime in the U.S. is committed by 13% of the population. That's a disparity. That should make us, ask some questions, for sure. But it's not something we start division over. It's not something that we say, oh, all black people are murderers then. Well, no. It would suggest that there is a deep moral problem in that community, but we don't go and join the KKK because of that. That's absurd. Why would you join the KKK just because certain, group is committing more violence? You don't join evil causes in order to right an evil that is there. And I'm using that as an example because I see so many people who call themselves Christians who are now marching with Black Lives Matter, posting all over Facebook. It's funny, some of these people, I have never heard the gospel. They claim to be Christians. I've never heard the gospel proclaimed by them once, but they're marching with Black Lives Matter. Now, I think a Christian dealing with other professing Christians, we should be more understanding. We try to think the best and look at things in the best light. And so my way of handling this when I see supposed Christians marching with a group like Black Lives Matter, which are basically no better than the KKK. In fact, I would argue much worse than the KKK. And that's going to be very controversial, but they are. I attribute that to ignorance. Most Christians are lazy, inconsistent people. They don't know their Bible. They haven't read their Bible. They don't know what the Bible teaches about partiality. They don't know what the Bible teaches about the role of government. They don't know what the Bible teaches about any of these things. And they just go with what people tell them based on how it sounds. Oh, the group's called Black Lives Matter. It's got to be good, right? Really? Because no evil group in history has ever had a nice sounding name before, right? A great example is if you've read 1984, which I have not, but I've heard people summarize it enough to know that the evil group whose job is to hide history and rewrite history to make it more PC, they're called the Ministry of Truth, when their whole purpose is to cover up the truth. This sort of thing happens all the time. A nice sounding name is given to a horrible, horrible group. Just read what Black Lives Matter stands for. Go to their website. They are CT. CT, critical theory. The idea is that people who are in a majority are evil. People who are in a minority are the truth. And we've got to tear down the structures that are superior. And so for Black Lives Matter, it's destroy white people and everything that they've ever built because they're evil. At the same time, what they don't understand is that CT is a multi-headed beast. It is a monster with many heads. Again, pitting the superior group versus the inferior group, or the oppressed versus the oppressor is the term that they use. That has multiple heads. You may join them in marching against white people or against the police or the government or whatever group you may choose to be marching against. But what you don't understand is Black Lives Matter and all these other CT groups at the same time stand for those other heads if they're consistent. Black Lives Matter has made it clear we must destroy the family. They have said that. We must destroy the family. Why? Because straight people are the majority and they've been perceived as the majority, and the LGBTQ infinity, beast thing is the oppressed class. Well, I know that many of you who call yourselves Christians would not support that, but you're supporting the other beast. Why? Because you're inconsistent. You are marching with evil people and justifying them, showing solidarity with them, when in fact they're trying to tear you down. Now here's the part of this CT beast that people also don't understand. They believe, as does Black Lives Matter and other groups like them, because the Democratic Party as a whole is CT as well. Christianity is considered one of the evil oppressor classes. Their goal is to destroy Christianity. And so when I look out there and I see people who call themselves Christians marching with Black Lives Matter, I'm looking at you and I'm like, you realize these people want to destroy Christianity. These people want to destroy the family. And I see you putting your little fists up there, which basically is no better than giving a Nazi salute. You don't care about Black lives. Or if you do, then you would not be marching with Black Lives Matter. Let's just take the thing that happened with George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, and think about it biblically and honestly. As a Christian, we have to call balls and strikes. We have to be honest about the sin in every situation. And the reality is, more often than not, there's not a good party and a bad party. It's very often there's two bad parties and both of them stink because we're dealing with humanity here. How should we have handled, if you really cared about Black lives and lives in general, if you were really a Christian, how should you have handled that situation? George Floyd was murdered. We see that. It's on video. It's objective. You can look. Yes, what this officer did was negligent, resulted in the guy's death, and the fact that, George Floyd was out for a long period of time, the officer had a good indicator that what he was doing could possibly kill him, and he didn't care. Now, if you come to this thing and you say, like Maxine Waters did, that he went out trying to get himself a black one that day, you are being impartial, you're being dishonest, you are being evil, you are trying to start a fight, you're trying to stir up division. That is wrong. We should condemn her just as much as we condemn Chauvin. Chauvin is wrong. Maxine Waters is wrong. Call them out for the sin that they have committed. I've done it. Most of you people who marched, you didn't say anything about Maxine Waters. Now, most of you probably didn't hear about it because the truth is y'all probably tune into media and stuff that wouldn't dare air that. Now let's take George Floyd. The people who are marching are lifting him up. They're painting murals of him. They're going to his funeral. They're making a saint out of this guy. George Floyd was a horrible human being. He was a terrible person. I don't care what his family says about him. We have his arrest record. We know what types of things he's done. He's done things that are unspeakable, including assaulting a pregnant woman with a gun because she was pregnant and he knew that she was vulnerable. I think if that lady had had a gun and she had shot him dead right there, she should be applauded. George Floyd was a horrible person. People kept saying, no, but he got better. He did better. But you know what? He was high. He died because of his drug situation. If he had been a normal person, not high, he wouldn't have died from what Chauvin did to him. It just wouldn't have happened. Now, Chauvin is still responsible. What he did was wrong. We all understand that. But basically, George Floyd sort of committed suicide in a way. His immoral lifestyle led to him being in such a bad place of health that he could have died from that situation. It's unfortunate. What we have is what I talked about. Two evil people wronging other people, and they both pay for it. If you are a Christian, you have to be honest. George Floyd is a terrible example. We should not be exalting him. We should not be justifying him because he is a wicked, wicked man. And the fact that people are showing pictures of him holding Bibles and praying and stuff like that, that should make you mad, because the world and the church are full of guys like George Floyd, horrible people who call themselves Christians and are bringing reproach to the name of Christ. These guys ought to be called out and excommunicated from the church. We should be using church discipline on the George Floyds of the world and not be having pictures of these bad people running around with Bibles. But simultaneously, we should be calling out the Chauvins as well. Call out both of them. Be honest. Don't choose, well, I'm only going to call out the sin of the white guy. You're being partial. I'm only going to call out the sin of the black guy. You're being partial. According to Jesus, a Christian does not judge according to the appearance. He judges righteous judgment. You call out both of them for the sin that they committed. And you don't march with the black version of the KKK. You don't march with Black Lives Matter. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say that. They're not the black version of the KKK. Again, they're worse. The KKK was about killing black people. Horrible, wrong. I'm amazed that they still exist. Very terrible institution. But the KKK, they don't go out and murder white people. They're partial, but they are partial towards their group and against another group. Black Lives Matter murders and brags about murdering black people. Many black people have been murdered in these riots. All right, let's just take, for example, again, George Floyd, terrible incident. Last I heard, 17 people have been murdered in these riots. Anyone see a problem here? You're marching with people who killed 17 because of one guy who was killed? Don't you think that's an imbalance? Don't you think that that is wrong? By the way, why aren't we talking about a guy like David Dorn, who was a police officer, who was a black guy, who had lived a very good life by human standards? He was shot dead by a rioter. Why aren't we talking about him? Why aren't we making an example of him? He's a guy you actually can make an example of to some extent, from a human standpoint. But you choose the criminal? You choose to make an example of the person that, if you are a decent human being, you would not want your children to grow up to be like. Guys, you're being played. You're being played by an anti-God and anti-Christian religion. And we've got to stop playing into their games. We got to stop showing partiality. Black Lives Matter. They say Black Lives Matter, but what do they show in reality? They boast in abortion. You know, the leading cause, or at least one of the leading causes of black people in America today, is murder at the hands of an assassin hired by their own parents. We call it abortion. We give it a pretty good name, but one of the leading causes of deaths for black people today is murder at the hands of their parents or by other black people, after they've been born. But Black Lives Matter doesn't care about that. They care about the 9 who were killed by cops last year. 9. You'll have a hard time finding a city in America where less than 9 are killed in any weekend by, other black people. Don't tell me that you think Black Lives Matter when you only demonstrate that you only care about a black person when it's a white person killing them. If you are outraged by the 9 who were killed, 9 unarmed black men who were killed last year, there is something to be concerned about there. I agree with you. I understand that. We don't think that should happen. Some of those 9, when you look at it closer, kind of were asking for it, for lack of better words. But we don't think that that's good. Nobody thinks that that's good, that it happens. But if you're going to lead marches, burn down cities, and support people who do so because of 9 guys, but you're ignoring the thousands and thousands who are being killed every year by people of the same color, and the thousands and thousands of babies who are being butchered. I would much rather be killed the way that George Floyd was killed. I would take it. I would die that way 10 times before I let somebody kill me the way that we kill babies. Ripping them apart, sucking their brains out, letting them be born and just leave them on a table to die. That is far worse, and they're babies. You people, you make me sick. What's worse is you make God sick. It would be better for a millstone to be tied about your neck and you'd be thrown into the sea than support a group like Black Lives Matter who rejoice in destroying the family and murdering children. We can't compare the police. Look, the police, they need work. my family in particular, has been the target of dirty cops. I know what it's like to be mistreated by bad cops. It happens. But we don't paint all cops that way because of a bad few. We don't paint all black people as violent criminals, even though 50% plus of violent crime is committed by them. We don't do that. I know. You probably know somebody who does. And I know some people who do it with cops. Those people are impartial. Those people are sinful. We should not join hands with them. We should call them out as sinners. At this point, I'm getting a little ticked off, and I don't want to go out here and say something that I'll later regret and have to take down off of YouTube. So I'm just going to try to trim this down, de-escalate a little bit. Partiality, showing preference to certain people or certain crimes. Now, here's one thing. I don't want you to take this the wrong way. People can have certain things that they emphasize. For example, my ministry here with JCPC Apologetics. It's about apologetics. In particular, my main thrust, my main goal is tearing down the false teachings of the charismatic Pentecostal movement, because they have wreaked so much havoc in the lives of believers. Not every Christian out there is going to be exposing the lies within the church as their predominant ministry. I get that. I don't fault them for that. That's what that's what I'm doing with my life. That's what I think I can honor God best with right now. That's not being impartial. That's not to say that other sins, a guy got mad at me the other day. Why are you pointing out these charismatic Pentecostals instead of the SDA? I'm like, you got a problem with the SDA? You make a video about the SDA. Without a doubt, SDA Church, Seventh-day Adventists, for those who don't know the abbreviation, they are a cult. I don't defend anything they do. I condemn them as a cult like they are. They are a modern form of the Judaizing heresy. But just because my focus is more on this group instead of that group doesn't mean that I am being partial. I condemn both. I just spend more time dealing with this one because that's more in line with my skill set and my passions, you might say. Because I know more people who are being deceived by the Pentecostal charismatic movement than I do who are being deceived by the SDA. If I had lots of friends who were being, hoodwinked by the SDA movement, then yeah, I would probably be there. So what I don't want you to hear me saying is that you can't have an area of expertise, an area that you talk about more. That's normal. That's expected. We're not all the eye. We're not all the ear. We have different roles. We're different parts of the body. That's fine. I understand that fully. But when you emphasize one thing, say, again, you're an apologist who deals with the Seventh-day Adventists. If I were to go and just lambast that guy and say, you're damaging the cause of Christ, you're a terrible person, I'm not even sure that you're a Christian. Why? Because you're talking about Seventh-day Adventists when you really should be talking about the charismatics and the Pentecostals. Am I being right in doing that? No. Both are issues that need to be dealt with. But the BLM people and all the people that I have heard marching and walking with them, that's what they do. You can't talk about, they get furious if you talk about blacks killing blacks. They get furious if you talk about abortion. Because unless you are talking about the 9 people who were killed by, unarmed black guys who were killed by cops last year, then you're wrong. You're evil. And some of them have even said you're not Christian. The truth is, all the issues in the world, the church needs to address, and most of them are too specialized for everybody to emphasize, to be experts on every one of them. So we get and we understand that you might have a different thing. Now, here's the problem. Here's where partiality comes in on this and where I get very upset. Is the people who call themselves Christians. I'm not worried about the world. The world does evil things. They are the world. That's what you expect of them. We should be holding them to a higher standard. We should be trying to affect the culture positively. I get all that. But there is an extent where lost people do what lost people do. But you people who call yourselves Christians, walking, marching with Black Lives Matter, saying that we should be supporting this leftist ideology, this CT stuff, you're not even like the guy who's saying you need to stop focusing on the charismatic heresies and focus more on the SDA. You're not even that. You're like a guy who says fast food is evil. All fast food is evil. We need to stop fast food. And all you do is talk about Taco Bell. And another guy comes along and says, you say that fast food is evil, but what about McDonald's over there? Don't you dare talk about McDonald's. We're talking about Taco Bell. Fast food is evil. Fast food is evil. Talk about Taco Bell. But McDonald's is much bigger. Stop talking about McDonald's. Taco Bell is evil. Fast food is evil. In that case, forgive the guy who was talking about McDonald's for calling you a hypocrite and just very disturbed individual. Why? Because if you really, your message is really, we got to stop fast food, you're going to tackle Taco Bell, you're going to tackle McDonald's, and let's say we specialize and say, yeah, I get that. I'm really emphasizing Taco Bell because their food is like really nasty, which I wish I could say that because I like their food more than I should. You'll at the same time, when the guy says, but what about McDonald's? You'll be like, yeah, McDonald's. We definitely got to deal with McDonald's. But the people out there who are marching with Black Lives Matter, the people out there who I see who call themselves Christians, who are supporting CT and all these CRT, critical race theory, and all these things, when you say, yeah, I believe that Black Lives Matter, sure, but Black Lives Matter is evil. They get furious at you. When you say, I obviously, believe that Black Lives Matter, but abortion is one of the leading causes of death of black people. They get furious at you. They want to kill you. In fact, they say, if you believe Black Lives Matter, you should support abortion, murder of children. If you say that most black people who are murdered by black people, they get furious at you. And because you would dare point out that we got to emphasize the 9 black people, unarmed black people who were killed last year by cops. Some of you might say, well, you're using a bad analogy because this really isn't so much about Black Lives Matter, which is weird because that's the one term y'all use. You say it's about police brutality. Oh yeah, okay, sure. Let's deal with police brutality. I get you. 9 unarmed black guys were killed last year by cops. Unacceptable. Something we need to deal with. I agree. I don't have a problem with that. But 19 white guys were. And far more black people were confronted by police officers. What does that say? If you're a white person, unarmed white person, and you meet a cop, you are far more likely to be killed than if you were a black person. That seems somewhat relevant. But if you say that, you're again demonized. What this tells me is that you people who are supporting Black Lives Matter, you people who are marching, you people who are doing these things, and for those who call me racist for saying you people, the majority of the people I'm talking about are white, okay? The majority of them are white. There are some black people out there who are like that. Most of the black people I know are not. And so if you're a black person who says, he's attacking me, oh my goodness, he's attacking. If this is not describing you, then I'm not talking about you, okay? So, chill out. The majority of people in my mind right now are white people. Don't tell me you care about black lives when you are fighting over 9 people. 9 tragedies. 9 tragedies, but you are ignoring thousands and thousands of babies being murdered when you are actively supporting the murder of thousands of people. Black Lives Matter, almost all their giving goes to the Democratic Party. Anywhere where life is horrible for black people, it is run by Democrats. They were the party that fought for racism. Democrats have always been about controlling black people and about, controlling people in general. That's their thing. That's why they're so attracted to communism, because communism is the notion that the Democratic Party, the government, is God. don't tell me you care about black people when you get mad that people are exposing, the truth. You are being impartial. You only care about black lives as long as it's a cop or a white person killing them. Look, do things happen today that are racially, or I would say ethnically, motivated? For sure. We should call those out when they happen. But we have to look at these things objectively. Not every instance where a white or a black person, or we ignore the Asians and the Hispanics and the Polynesian and all the other people groups. For some reason, it's always white and black for whatever reason, because it's politically motivated. We ignore those guys, but not every time where you have an instance where those two groups collide is it racially motivated. I still do not believe that Derek Chauvin was racist. I do not believe that he did what he did because he was racist. I believe he did what he did because he's a bully cop. What we don't often see is the fact that there were 4 cops involved. Chauvin was the only white one. We had one he looked Hispanic, one who was Asian, and one who was black. This was not racially motivated, but y'all made it all about racism. I'm sorry, if the event that you use to start a movement is unrelated to the movement, if police brutality is the thing, then yeah, great example. But if it's about race, then this is not it. Show me evidence. You can't just go around and throw names at people and say they're racist because white guy versus black guy. So I say all that to say this. Forgive me if I do not find your arguments very convincing. When you defend murderers of children and get upset and burn down the city and kill 17 people over one guy who abused his authority, and again, let's use the broader example of the 9 from last year. 9 guys who potentially abused their authority and took lives. What it looks like from a normal perspective, because the majority of people don't see things the way that you guys do, is that you want the excuse to be lawless. You want the excuse to be, to be able to sin, to be able to mistreat, rob, and just do terrible things without consequence. The fact that you refuse to call out sin, the sin of rioting, the sin of looting, the sin of, or in example, what I see a lot in the church, especially from SBC leaders, is, okay, yeah, rioting and the 17 people killed, okay, that's wrong, but it's understandable why they're doing what they're doing. It's understandable? It's understandable? Are you serious? What are you talking about? It's understandable. Would I say it's understandable for Chauvin? Let's take an example. Turns out Chauvin and George Floyd, they used to be co-workers. That is a fact. They used to work at the same place. We don't know that they knew each other, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say Chauvin probably knew who George Floyd was. He probably knew about the time that he held up a pregnant woman, and he may have killed him as revenge for that because George Floyd was a dirtbag. And you would say, how dare you try to justify? How dare you try to see things from the perspective of Chauvin? How dare you try to see the things from the perspective of these absolute horrible people who are out rioting, who are tearing down statues, who are burning buildings, who are destroying people's lives and killing people? How dare you march with a movement that is proud of the fact they want to destroy Christianity, the fact they want to destroy the family, the fact that they rejoice that they murder children in mass? There is nothing understandable about that. We should reject it. You are straining about 9 tragic deaths, and you've killed 17 people. You've endorsed the murder of millions of babies. We can, again, be specialized. We can say, my emphasis is this. I am more concerned personally from my training and from my whatever. I want to deal with this issue specifically. Fine. I want to see some police reform, quite frankly. I have seen enough in my life to know that the police do have a tendency to abuse their power. I am fully on board. But don't act like only black people are at the receiving end of that. Lots of more white people than black people are on the receiving end of that, because they know, the cops know, the bad ones, they're not going to get in trouble. I'm going to be honest. The truth is, when a white person hears that another white person was shot by a cop, more often than not, we look at it and we're like, yeah, he probably deserved it. We don't tend to defend, as a general rule, in the white community. We don't defend our criminals. Criminals who die being criminals, we usually tend to think of, well, he got what he deserved. But in the black community, there is a tendency to excuse the sin of the one who was shot. And very often, the guy gets shot, and it's like, well, is that something that a person should die for? George Floyd resisting arrest, being high, trying to buy things with counterfeit money. Was that worth being killed over? No. But you don't defend George Floyd's sin in that situation just because he shouldn't have been killed for it. You have to be honest and call both out. So, I'd like to wrap this up. Be specialized. If you want to deal with police brutality, yes, deal with police brutality. I think that's a noble cause for a Christian to undertake. But when you make it all about a particular ethnic group, you're being partial. You are sinning. What about the 19 white guys who got the same thing? What about the Hispanic people? Their numbers were higher than that of black. Black, you're actually the least likely to be killed by cops when you take into consideration the amount of time a cop engages a black person, a cop engages a white person. When you take those into consideration, when a cop meets a white person or a Hispanic person, he's more likely to get killed, or the white or Hispanic person is more likely to be killed than is the black person. And the cop is far more likely to be killed than any of them. That's something you got to take into consideration. There was a time in my life when I was younger, I actually thought about being a cop. I'm glad I never went that direction, because truth is, you deal daily with the fact that somebody might try to kill you. I'm sorry, that might make you a little bit trigger happy. Is that good? No, it means you need better training, you need to be more prepared. But we need to be able to look objectively at each situation and realize that there is not always a good party and a bad party. Sometimes sometimes they're both bad. It's impartial to say, well, I'm only going to acknowledge the sin of one. And if you dare to acknowledge the sin of the other, then you are bad. You are an evil person. No, that makes you impartial. That makes you everything that you hate. And that's the way I want to leave it. You people who are walking with Black Lives Matter, you people who are supporting the Democratic Party, you people who call yourselves Christians and do these things, you are everything that you are pretending to hate. You are a hypocrite. According to Scripture, if you are saved, you are the least in the kingdom of heaven. And it may be an indicator that you are not. This woke movement, this Black Lives Matter Democrat movement, this up until now, I know it's been more PC is the word we like to use. It's a religion. It is another religion entirely. It is not Christian. You can be in that religion and be a part of other religions. That's the thing. It's like a chameleon. But it is another religion entirely. And I have a good video on that. Not that I did, but a guy I know named John Harris. And I might post it after this is over. So you might want to check it out. But stop showing partiality. It doesn't matter if a black guy was killed by a cop. It doesn't matter if he was killed by a white guy, a black guy, Hispanic guy. It doesn't matter if he was killed by an alien. Call out the sin of his murder for what it is, and rejoice in the fact that Chauvin has paid for it. He is going to jail. He has been convicted. This thing should be done. The wrong of one person doesn't justify you doing sin. Doesn't justify you going out and marching with the wicked. It doesn't. If you have supported Black Lives Matter, you have 17 deaths on your hands. And you say, no, I was a peaceful protester. I was peaceful. You could have waited until Black Lives Matter was out of the picture, till they were done with their protests, do your own protest, or even do a protest at the same time as them and say, we are not Black Lives Matter. We condemn Black Lives Matter. We're nothing like them. We are, against police brutality. We are against, partiality. And just be honest. But the fact that you tell us, no, you can't talk about the sins of this guy, but you have to talk about the sins of this guy or you're a horrible person. You are impartial. You're a hypocrite. You are the least in the kingdom of heaven. And I'm sick and tired of it in the church. I could go on about the fact that Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Party are trying to bring in communism. I could talk about the fact that the strategy that they're using of dividing people based on skin color, ethnicity, and based on their financial status is a strategy that the British Empire used to conquer half the world. I mean, you look at England, it's a little island, the UK. It's not that big, but they conquered half the world. You know how they did it? They would go to an area, take, for example, Uganda, where I do a lot of work. I've heard this story from the Ugandans. They would come, there were all these tribes, and they'd be like, you see that Baganda tribe, these big guys? They're abusing you. They're taking advantage of you. They are systematically racist against you. You need to really show those Baganda people who's boss. And we, your friends, the British Empire, we're going to give you some weapons. We're going to help you out. And so you have these tribal warfares, them killing each other off, both sides destroying each other. And when the nation has been reduced to rubble and it's on fire, the British Empire comes to restore peace, justice, and now they control you. They control you, the tribe that they set against that tribe. They control both of you. And the rebels, the ones that the communists, and that means you as a marcher with Black Lives Matter, or a marcher in general, they call you the useful idiot. And they lock you up first. And probably kill you in some very terrible ways. This strategy has been used all throughout history. Many of the greatest empires that existed couldn't do what they did with the number of people that they had. They had to expand by sowing division amongst the locals. If you can't see, that's what this Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Party, and you know what? I think the Republican Party is in on it too, to be honest. I don't want anyone to hear me as a shill for the Republican Party. I'm just as disappointed with them as well, not just as disappointed. You are comparing apples and oranges there. The Democratic Party is far worse. But the Republicans, they're bad. They are sowing division. They are causing division for the purpose of taking both of y'all. For the purpose of having power over everyone. And you guys who call yourselves Christians are playing into it. And that's a problem. But you know what the biggest problem with all this is? Is that the marchers, the ones that I have interacted with, one thing that they're unified with, almost totally, is them saying, go march, support black people, even though you're supporting murder of black people. Support black people and do not preach the gospel. If you preach the gospel, you are not being Christian. That's a message I have heard. Beth Moore supported that message. Do not preach the gospel to these lost people. They don't need the gospel. The gospel's not enough to reconcile people to each other. That's the message that this crowd is getting out. And it's a message that every Bible-believing Christian should oppose and fight to the death. You want to know how people who hate each other, because that's just the real issue. If we talk about this ethnic hatred thing, that's what it is. People who hate each other based on different things. You got more than me. I hate you. This guy, he has a different color skin than I do. I hate him. You'll never get black people and white people to stop hating each other. You'll never get Hispanic and Asian people to quit hating each other and all the other groups I mentioned. Because people are people. They are sinners. Now, a group cannot reconcile with another group, period. They might officially on paper be reconciled, but this guy in that group and this guy in that group, they didn't sign that paper and they still hate each other. How reconciliation happens is on an individual, one-to-one basis. oh Bubba over here reconciling with his black brother over there. And how does that happen? How does that truly happen? It happens when we realize that we all the same. We're in the same boat. We're all sinners. We're all sinners. We all deserve hell. If God was fair, if God was, just a God of fairness, we'd all be burning in hell right now. And we realize that despite our sin, our grievous and terrible sin, God has shown his mercy on us, and he has saved us. And since I am a totally depraved sinner, saved by the grace of God, why would I think I'm better than that guy? Just because of his skin color. I was an enemy of God. I hated God. Why would I think I'm better than that guy? And you know what? That guy, he's received forgiveness the same as I have. Yeah, he might look different than me, but he's more of a brother to me than that white guy down the road who's marching with Black Lives Matter. He's more of a brother to me than that white guy who calls himself a pastor, who's telling people, don't give them the truth. Don't preach the gospel to them. The only way that we can be brought together, the only way that people can reconcile is on a one-to-one basis. You be reconciled with everybody that you can, as much as, as it has to do with you, live peaceably with all men. And that can only come through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And perhaps you've clicked on this video and you just clicked on it because you wanted to hear another, race-based video. Quite frankly, I've had enough of them. I'm sick and tired of it. This is not the conversation and ministry I wanted to have, for sure. And so I'm praying that by the grace of God, I can get back to my normal stuff in the near future. But maybe you've clicked on this video and you're looking for that sort of thing, but you don't know what the gospel is. Or maybe you're a woke Christian. Maybe you marched with somebody. Maybe you have actively given money to or supported Black Lives Matter. Or maybe you're on the other side of this thing. Maybe you're starting to hate black people because of the way that the media is showing partiality towards them. Truth is, regardless of these camps you might fall into, the truth is you might be holding to the positions you're holding to because you do not understand the gospel. Most of this stuff would be cleared up very quickly in the church if we understood the gospel. And so I'm recommending that after this video is over, that you click on this video that I'm going to leave linked. And it's called What is the Gospel? And there I'll explain to you what the gospel is. And if you repent and you believe that gospel, you will automatically, it'll be not easy. There is a thing called sanctification. We don't become perfect overnight. But you will automatically have the power, that is the Holy Spirit living in you, to overcome your partiality. And you will be able to reconcile with individuals who are willing to reconcile. So I recommend you click on this video, that you share it, because what we need now is not more woke people walking around trying to set up a utopia on earth. I've got a video on that coming out. What we need is the gospel of Jesus Christ, preached clearly and preached truthfully. And we need Christians who are willing to, yes, be specialized in one area or another, but not at the same time putting down people who point out sins of a kind that they are not emphasizing. Call everything for what it is. Be honest. Don't lie to make your position seem more tenable. And if your position is not defensible, then maybe you're the one in sin. With that said, I've said enough. I'm tired. Again, it's very hot where I am right now, and I'm burning up. So I'll see you next time. I hope this was beneficial to you guys. God bless. Have a great day. And proclaim the gospel everywhere, because it is the only thing that will reconcile sinners and deal with the sin of partiality. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and feel free to like and share it so others can see it as well. Also, subscribe so that you can keep up to date on future videos. And as always, please check below to see resources that I've used that might help you further your studies. God bless and have a great day.